Hello, EJ here from the Back Porch Antiques, and today I'm going to be talking with you about a little bit about quilts. Just give you a little bit of a survey about what quilts might be worth, what quilts are more popular, what would make a quilt more valuable, something that you can learn about quilts that possibly have been handed down to you generationally, and maybe even a little bit about how to care for those particular quilts. So here at the Back Porch Antiques, we have a lot of quilts to choose from if by chance you are in the market for something like that. But we also have quite a few examples that we can share with you that might teach you just a little bit more about what will value a quilt. Just kind of from the beginning, there are a couple different kinds of quilts. Here in southern Appalachia, the southern United States, you will see mostly two kinds of quilts, a pieced quilt and an applique quilt, or you could see a combination of the two. A pieced quilt is literally where an individual, a seamstress, will take the pieces of fabric and put them together in sewing efforts to make a design. You will see that here as an example of that. This is a double wedding band pattern. And all of these different pieces of fabrics have been cut up and placed in this double wedding band pattern. And it's called double wedding band because the rings are overlapping each other. Traditionally, this quilt was given to a bride, perhaps, at the occasion of her wedding. A group would get together and quilt this and give it as a gift to the bride during her wedding time. But that's what this is a pieced quilt. An applique quilt, the process of applique is actually taking the stitching in a piece of fabric and making design out of it. Applying design, applique, apply, applying design to the fabric through the quilting process. And you can see that in these particular quilts. You can see different swirls and flowers and things like that that are designed out of the stitching itself. So, about styles of quilts, you have things like this, which are pieced quilts and the double wedding band. And then you have things like this. The pattern here is called Enhanced 9 because the particular pattern is of 9 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the corners of this particular pattern are bulged out. As you'll notice, each of these are using different pieces of fabric, different designs of fabric to add to the allure of their art. This particular process, quilting in general, is a way that people would show their talent, their efforts. In a time where there was no social media, there was no television, there weren't many things to do other than work. This was a pastime that was useful. Now, one thing I'd like for you to notice about this particular quilt is that the backing, I don't know how well you can see it, but this particular backing is made of old feed sacks. So this quilt is made out of material that the seamstress had laying around in a time where store-bought material was not extremely available. And I would date this particular quilt late 1800s, maybe early 1900s, maybe later than that, maybe even the 1920s. But it was in a time where things were not readily available. Probably more 1920s with the elaborate fabrics that she has found or that the seamstress found. But again, this particular Enhanced 9 pattern, this particular quilt is a $250 quilt. The older they get, the more valuable they get, as you could imagine. Now, one way to date a particular quilt is by the stitching. And modern stitching came into play 1940s, 1950s in southern Appalachia, where we're from, probably a little bit later than that because of economic standards and things like that. But when you look at a particular quilt, say this particular quilt, you look at the stitching and you'll notice that it is very uniform and that it's very tight. Everything looks the same. That is a particular piece that is machine stitched. And they run it through a sewing machine, which makes sense. If you had that particular piece, you would want to do that. But then you look at a quilt like this, a hand-stitched quilt, and you look at the stitching. You look at where it's sewn together, the thread. And you'll notice that there are some long stitches, some short stitches, some that are further away, some that are a little too close, some that overlap. That's an indicator of hand stitching, and that will make that normally an older piece. If you apply that to the history of the piece, if you apply that to the condition of the piece, the fabrics that are used, you can deduce the fact that that is an older quilt. Now, there are people who still will hand stitch quilts just for the nostalgia of it and things like that. So you have to judge the age of a quilt, of a piece, in its entirety. But that's a main indicator. Quilting is a very big part of our community. One story that I'd like to mention to you, here locally, quilting has been a big part of family life, family history. During the Civil War, there have been several pieces that were pilfered by opposing military status, if you will. Here locally in northeast Tennessee, we were occupied at different times by both the Confederate and Union armies. It was one of those areas to where when the Union Army would come to town, they would fly the American flag. When the Confederate Army came to town, they would fly the Confederate flag. And anything that they could do to save and protect their pieces of family art, family history, but in this particular story, they saved a quilt by burying it in the pigsty. If you want to hear just a little bit more about that, we have another video at some point that will introduce to you some reference books, and I highlight that specific story in that video, and you can learn a little bit more about how this particular family in Greene County saved their family quilt by burying it with the pigs. Quilting is, again, a way that hobbies are shown, but it is a very big collectorship in the modern time. We have a lot of our regular customers are collectors of quilts. So again, I want you to come check out the fact that we have lots of quilts here at the Back Porch Antiques. I'd love to sit down with you. I can show you some of the different things that make quilts better or worse or more valuable, things like that. But really the main indicator in the value of a quilt is its age. So as always, I'd appreciate the fact if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like this video, subscribe, ring that bell, and we'd sure appreciate it. I'll see you next time here at the Back Porch.